Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. For more than a year now, the media storyline in immigration has been as mindless and predictable as a Jim Acosta script. The talking points never change. It doesn't matter what the story is. Could be the caravan or family separation, sanctuary cities, even MS-13. The details are irrelevant. Immigration is always good, whether it's legal or not, because immigrants are always good. It doesn't matter where they're from or how much English they speak or how they've lived their lives, what they've done before. Immigrants are always the heart of America. By definition, they're impressive, much more impressive than actual Americans, most of whom are fat and racist. That's Jim Acosta's position. Or it was. You may have noticed that the other channels suddenly seem less eager to talk about immigration. They're de-emphasizing the issue. Why is that? Well, part of the problem may be the caravan, which actually exists and is in Tijuana, Mexico right now. Now, this should be good news for Mexico, if you believe what they've been telling us on TV. If there's one thing we know for certain about penniless Central American immigrants, it's that they tend to found a huge number of wildly successful tech startups. They're at the heart of your economy. And yet, the citizens of Tijuana don't appear to have gotten this message because they don't seem grateful for the caravan. Instead, they look highly annoyed that their city has been invaded by strangers. As the city's mayor noted, when people enter your country illegally, many of them are criminals.
These people are coming in violently, unrespectfully, not as a good law-abiding citizen, and that's what hurt us. It's not all of them, but yes, a lot of them are not really nice people who want to work, who want to integrate to our economy. They're just troublemakers.
A lot of them are not really nice people. They're troublemakers. Imagine an American mayor saying something like that on television. And it got more intense from there. Last night on this show, a Tijuana city councilman told us that the government had to intervene recently to keep Mexican citizens and the caravan members from throwing rocks at each other. Watch.
We had to bring him over here because the neighbors from that part of town, it's called Playas de Tijuana, it's like Tijuana by the sea, they were getting mad and they even started throwing stones at each other. So we had him over here, like 360, but things got out of hand because it kept growing and growing.
Throwing rocks at immigrants? That doesn't happen in this country. It does happen in Mexico, though. People who live in Tijuana are not American. So they haven't been told that expressing their honest views about immigration will get you fired. So they have no problem saying what they really think, and what they really think turns out to be very much like what Donald Trump really thinks, amazingly. Listen.
Should this caravan have been stopped at the Guatemala border?
Of course. I agree with that 100%. It should have.
Your country have to be beware of these people because they are people, they are bad people.
Because they don't belong here, they're just migrants, but it's like the same, in the same case, it's like when Mexican migrants going to the U.S., they're undocumented.
You know of incidences here in Tijuana and in other cities that some of these people that are coming into with these caravans are committing crimes. This is not about racism. We don't dislike a certain group of people because they're from one country or another. We are here because our government has not taken control of these, what we call invasion.
Now, if you're CNN or MSNBC or NBC News or ABC, what do you do with an interview like that? You can't put it on the air because it doesn't make sense according to the rules you've established. You can't really argue that Mexicans are anti-Hispanic racists. That's what you call everyone else who's opposed to immigration. So what do? Well, you just pretend that none of this is happening. It's not real. And that's what they're doing. But that won't work forever. People tend to notice obvious things. They can't help it. And if they keep noticing obvious things, their views change. And that's why the consensus on immigration is changing fast. Even Hillary Clinton and John Kerry recently warned that mass immigration can destabilize countries, as it's done in Europe. They're right, of course. It's happening here, too. A new analysis of census data shows that 63% of non-citizens in this country receive some kind of welfare benefits. That's not what they told you, but those are the numbers from the census. Even among legal immigrants, the best kind, the ones who become naturalized citizens, fully half are on government assistance. By the way, that's well above the native average. Now, leaving aside the moral considerations, Does it work as a math question? Well, it would work in a country with infinite resources. Is America a country with infinite resources? Well, look around. Every night, hundreds of thousands of our citizens, Americans, sleep outdoors on the street. They're homeless. The country's middle class is shrinking and dying younger for the third year in a row. Again, these are American citizens. Some of them probably think they should have first dibs on help from the government, but they're not getting it. And by the way, looking forward, here's a question that no one's considering. Will the mass immigration we're now watching make this country richer or poorer? In fact, the majority of our immigrants have only a high school education or less. Many of them know very little English, some none at all. Now, that was a difficult problem to solve 100 years ago during our first major wave of immigration, but consider what it means now at a time when automation is killing entire sectors of our economy. How are immigrants with low levels of education and low levels of English supposed to succeed in an increasingly high-tech, skills-based economy? And by the way, how about our own vulnerable workers? Do they benefit from the presence of these immigrants? These are real questions. They're critical questions that Washington should be thinking about deeply and answering. But Washington isn't thinking about them, and Washington can't answer them. So instead, they're trying to ban the conversation from taking place. We're going to try again anyway to have it. Luis Miranda is a former DNC communications director, and he joins us tonight. Luis, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Tucker. I appreciate the opportunity to have an honest conversation on this, particularly as we're also remembering President George H.W. Bush, who taught us that we can disagree on some of these issues, but do it respectfully. So I really appreciate the chance to do this.
Well, I do too.
Yeah, I went to the Capitol yesterday just after leaving the studio here to see him. Took my kids, and that was one of the things we talked about, is that there's going to be different perspectives on these issues, but we can talk about them respectfully.
Right.
And I think what you've laid out here brings up some very legitimate issues. The question is,
that's what I like about what's happening in Tijuana, and I feel deeply for the people of Tijuana because I think they're going through what a lot of Americans have gone through. But because it is Tijuana and it is Mexico, we can't dismiss them as anti-Hispanic. And so we have to look more clearly at what their concerns are. And so my question to you is a very simple one. Looking at the concerns that we just played on tape, and those are real, does it make you a little more empathetic toward our fellow Americans who have similar feelings?
I think we have to be empathetic all around here, which includes people who have legitimate concerns, but a lot of those concerns are being stoked without a basis of reality. And so here's the problem, that a lot of these immigrants that are part of this caravan are decent people who are fleeing either violence or economic situations that are untenable. But they're victims all around because they're being victimized by human traffickers and smugglers that want to take advantage of them.
I agree with that.
And so there's actually an AP analysis that just came out that 4,000 of these people have disappeared in the last few years on the way.
Yes.
In other words, their families have no idea what happened to them. They either got murdered or worse just along the way. And so there's a legitimate humanitarian crisis of people who were being taken advantage of and victimized on that end.
I totally agree, but I just want to shine the light on the victims who don't really get representation of any kind in the press, and those are the citizens who are having to absorb large populations of, and I agree with you, largely decent people. I think most migrants want what I want, which is a better life for their families. I get it.
That's exactly right.
I don't think most of them are criminals.
I've
always thought that. But hold on. But I think it's important to empathize as deeply with the citizens whose lives are being upended by the arrival of these immigrants as it is with the immigrants themselves. So when you see this, can you say that, you know, American citizens say, I don't want any more immigration. We've had more than we can handle. They're not just racist, are they? I mean, they have a point. Do they not?
I don't think they're racist. I think it's important that they also understand the other side of this, which is that immigrants have actually made our economy a lot stronger through the years. You touched on it a little bit at the beginning. Let me add some color to that, which includes that our population is aging. We have baby boomers retiring, and a lot of the people that we are able to replace in the economy are because of immigration. Now, we want to do that ideally in a legal and orderly fashion, but the reality is that we have a huge advantage over Europe.
Hold on. I need to ask this question. You say our population is aging. We're not reproducing ourselves. Why do you think that is? Nobody seems to pause and ask, why can't young Americans afford to get married and have children, afford to buy homes and cars? And their solution, the elite solution, is we'll just bring in new people. But what about the Americans, the young people? I'm a 30-year-old American. I can't afford to have kids. Does anybody care about that person? I mean, maybe there's a real problem here that we well, really? Because I never hear that person addressed ever. No one
And it's
ever
not
says
just the
that.
United
It's like,
States.
oh,
This
we
is
need
happening
immigration.
it's an industrialized country issue more than
but
it
I'm
has
an
to do
American.
with...
But hold on, I'm an American. Okay, so my concern is for my fellow Americans, and they can't afford to have children. But rather than fix their problems or even think about them, we're like, we'll just import new children. Does that seem like a sort of ass-backward way to approach this?
We should be able to do both. Look, over the last 10 years, American companies and stocks have outperformed the rest of the world by a lot. American companies and the economy have been so strong over the last 10 years compared to anything else in the world. And part of the reason for that is because we have an economy that is constantly renewing itself. And so we absolutely should be able to have an economy where people who want to have children can do so. But it doesn't mean that we don't have the space to absorb it.
No, but hold on. But that's not what you're saying. Hold on. You just said we need to bring in people because Americans aren't reproducing in sufficient numbers. And my question is, why aren't our leaders thinking about how our people can afford to have children? They don't even consider that a subject worth studying, much less trying to fix. It's just like, oh, well, they're not having enough kids.
But
why doesn't anyone care enough?
Those are mutually exclusive things.
You're saying that our low birth rates are the justification for immigration. I'm saying our low birth rates are a tragedy that say something awful about our economy and the selfish stupidity of our leaders.
It's a combination of our growth and our prosperity that enables us to have a stronger economy. So there's definitely both sides to this where you can look at, well, who are going to be hurt. But when you've looked at states like Georgia and others that have implemented anti-immigrant measures that forced a lot of these immigrants out, what you saw was food rotting on the vines, a lot of lost crops because there weren't enough people there to work them. And so the reality is that we can both do something about strengthening the economy for people who are suffering and who are American and who have lived here their whole lives. They want to have children. They want to have an opportunity to do better than their parents
Maybe
did.
someone should care about them a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's the most important thing. Nothing is even close to as important.
But that doesn't mean that we have to demonize the immigrants who are legitimate victims of this
I'm not
process.
demonizing anybody. I'm not against the immigrants. I'm just for Americans, and nobody cares about them. It's like, shut up, you're dying, we're going to replace you. And it's deeply offensive. Anyway, we're out of time. I hope you will come back, because I enjoyed that conversation. Thank you.
Likewise,
Luis.
Tucker. Thank you.
The Mueller investigation appears to be approaching some kind of climax as a special prosecutor plans to drop new information on Michael Flynn and other key targets of the probe. Michael Flynn? What? Britt Hume will be here to explain what that means for the administration and the rest of us. Stay tuned. Well, after a year and a half of investigations and much touted, but in the end, false breakthroughs, the Mueller investigation finally appears to be approaching something. This very evening, new information is expected to drop about the investigation's plea deal with former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Remember General Flynn? And then sometime this week, the investigation is expected to file new court documents about Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort as well. What does all of this mean, if anything? To help us unwind it, we go to the man who helps us unwind things, Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume. Britt, thanks a lot for coming on tonight. Michael Flynn, let me just ask the overview question first, then please explain the Michael Flynn portion to me. But does anything you have seen so far touch directly on contact with collusion with Russia?
Nothing that I've seen has, Tucker, and I must say I've reached the point now where we've seen so many of these moments in this investigation when somebody or other gets subpoenaed or somebody pleads guilty to some process crime like lying to the FBI or whatever, and people extrapolate from that Mueller is on the verge now of the big one that is going to tell the tale of President Trump's malfeasance. And it's never happened. And the investigation drags on. And I was sort of the view that everybody was misreading all this, that what was happening here was that Mueller was carrying out what was, after all, his original mandate. And his original mandate was primarily to take over a counterintelligence investigation that was about what the Russians did. That's what Comey was doing at the FBI. Right. And when he got fired, and that's what Mueller was named to take over. And it was and if you go back and look at the statement that was made by Rod Rosenstein in naming Mueller, it says he's to take over the investigation that Comey had announced was going on in his congressional testimony when we became aware that this FBI inquiry was underway. Well, that was a counterintelligence investigation. And he adds that he was authorized as well to look into the question of whether there was collaboration between the Trump campaign and Moscow. Well, fine. So we knew that was going on, and it has never been the case, as far as I can tell, looking at the documents, that the principal focus was this collusion question. So Mueller has proceeded along the way. He ends up indicting a whole bunch of Russians who will probably never see trial, but it was a sign that what the Russians were doing was a big part of what he was up to, which all made sense to me. This latest stuff, I don't know what to make of it, actually. I wish I could tell you, Tucker. You asked me to unwind it. I would if I could. But, you know, every little twist and turn in this is being hyped always as the prelude to the big one, the big breakthrough, the big bombshell that keeps coming and never has come. In fact, you know,
well, may I just ask you about Michael Flynn quickly? Because his name has been out of the headlines for, boy, over a year. But am I misremembering it? Or did Michael Flynn plead to lying? Basically to a crime that arose in the course of the investigation.
Right.
And then his life was completely destroyed. He had to sell his house. I think he's still unemployed. Did he do something else that I forgot about?
No, not that I know of. I mean, Michael Flynn was supposed to have not told the truth to some FBI agents who were interviewing him, and that was what he was charged with. Possibly in the hope that by charging him with that and being prepared to sentence him, he would then, you know, spill the beans on what was really going on between Trump and Russia. Well, it seems to have turned out that he didn't really have any beans to spill, and not only that, Tucker, it's very hard to see, you know, where any of this is going, and when you see people being investigated and then prosecuted for crimes that didn't happen until after the investigation got started, you begin to stop and say, wait a minute, what are we doing here? This is what, you know, remember Karl Rove was pursued remorselessly by Special Prosecutor Patrick Fitzgerald about the famous Valerie Plame CIA leak. And it turned out, we later found out that leak, the source of that leak had been known from the very start, and they pursued him anyway. And this is the problem with this is the problem with special counsels, is that they become almost another branch of government, that they are theoretically accountable to main justice, but as a practical matter, they don't seem to be. And they go on and on and on, and in the meantime, you know, of course, they've got all this process. They can use subpoenas and grand jury testimony and the threats of perjury investigations and all that to pressure people. And, you know, now we're hearing that Roger Stone may be, you know, prepared it won't stick up for Trump, won't testify against Trump. And so now we're getting into... Yeah, well, it's into the weeds here, and my view is we need to get this. Right. This report needs to be finished. We want to know what they've got, and we above all want to find out what the Russians actually did. I'd love to know. It would tell us about whether it made any difference in the election or not. I hope.
I think we know, but we'll be waiting, and apparently there'll be a sentencing report tonight pertaining to Michael Flynn. Catherine Harris is standing by for it. If we get it in the course of this hour, of course, we'll bring it to you. Brit Hume, thank you very much.
Okay, Tucker, you bet.
Obviously, no one I like talking to more than Brit Hume. There is a special digital feature out tomorrow on the new digital platform, Fox Nation. We just had a long conversation about George H.W. Bush for that, and it, again, will appear on Fox Nation tomorrow morning. In just a few weeks, Democrats will be running the House of Representatives. Will their top priority be helping the country or impeaching the president? Or maybe a little of both? That's next. Well, Democrats took back the House in November's midterm elections. There are a lot of reasons voters may have given them back a share of power. Maybe they trusted them more on health care or social programs or the economy. The polls aren't exactly clear. Newly elected Democrats say they plan to make a priority of legislation over investigations. But is that true? The Daily Beast's Betsy Woodruff says that much of the party is most interested in the chance to take part in a Trump impeachment. Watch this.
Democrats are lining up to get on House Judiciary because they're expecting it to be the place where the action is, in part, of course, because Nadler would be in a position to preside over any potential impeachment proceedings.
Chris Hahn is a progressive radio host and former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer. He joins us tonight. Chris, thanks a lot for coming on. So I don't understand all the lying and embarrassment. So obviously Pelosi has decided, and she went through this again when she was Speaker in 2006, when Democrats wanted to impeach Cheney and Bush, and she said, we're not going to talk about that in public. She's trying to keep her troops from talking about impeachment. But the overwhelming majority of Democratic voters are for impeaching Trump, and why wouldn't they be? They've been told he's a war criminal. I get it. So why are we lying about what Democrats have a mandate to do from their voters? Impeach.
Well, look, I think there's people in the party that would like to see some sort of investigation of the president, but I think the majority was won in suburban swing districts, which want people to work on things like health care, changing the tax reform so it benefits the middle class, and other issues that they campaigned on. Most of the campaign was not about impeachment. I have always said to you, I don't believe we're at a point where impeachment will be a real thing, and I think impeachment has to be a bipartisan thing. Of course it has to be for removal in the Senate. I think Nancy Pelosi knows that. She will be the Speaker of the House. I do not think, barring some major revelation in the Mueller report, I don't think you will see impeachment on the agenda for the next Congress.
Well, I think that's probably right because Democrats are terrified of her, and anyone who steps out of line is crushed. Poor Marcia Fudge got totally destroyed by Nancy Pelosi when she briefly suggested running against her. People are afraid of Pelosi. I get it. I'm just saying it doesn't make much sense. I mean, I've spent 2 years listening to Democrats say that this guy, comparing him literally to Hitler, and saying that he colluded with a foreign power, he's treasonous. Many people have said that. So if he's all the things that you've told us he is, why don't you have a moral obligation to impeach him this afternoon? I'm serious.
Well, look, like I've said, unless there's something that both sides agree is criminal, ready for removal, I don't see Nancy Pelosi allowing that to go forward in the House. Look, we know what happened when they tried to impeach Bill Clinton. It made Bill Clinton stronger.
You're right. You're right. Look, again, I agree with you as a political matter. You're absolutely right. And Pelosi's very smart politically, and she knows it'll hurt Democrats if she tries to impeach. And so I'm sort of in jest encouraging you to impeach because it would hurt you. But I'm also sort of serious about this. Let's take your rhetoric seriously. How can you live in a country with a president who is like Hitler, who colludes with Vladimir Putin to destroy our democracy? He's literally evil.
Well,
they tell us that every day. MSNBC is predicated on that idea. Yeah, no, seriously.
My answer to that is we're not going to be able to remove him through impeachment. The only way to remove Donald Trump is to beat him at the election box. So what I have said and what others have said is Democrats should investigate where there's clear evidence of problems within his administration so that it makes it harder for him to get reelected in 2020. If you try to impeach him without the Republicans coming on board to actually remove him, it is a waste of time, it's a waste of political capital, and it will lead to the Democrats losing their majority and Donald Trump being reelected president in 2020. But if you run government good, if you put good bills in front of his desk that he will not sign, then he will have a hard time getting reelected.
But is there a time when Democrats say, look, you know, we disagree with Trump on some things, not that many things, to be totally honest, on a policy level, not that many things, but some things. We don't like his style. We don't think he should tweet. But that time that we said he was a traitor to his country or like Hitler, we shouldn't have said that because that was like a grotesque overstatement that made us look stupid. And it was kind of wrong to talk that way. Is anybody ever going to say that?
Well, I hope people, I don't know if they're going to actually say that. It seems like the apology and taking things back is gone from American politics. But what I do hope is we'll see people come together on things they can find common ground on and pass bills on things that will work. I'm encouraged by this criminal justice reform that's out there right now.
Everyone's so moderate all of a sudden. I love it. Yeah.
I'm encouraged by that
good.
sort of stuff.
Look,
I want to see real infrastructure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you're right.
Nobody ever says they're sorry anymore. It's a lost art form in politics in this country. So I wouldn't hold my breath on that.
They should. Okay. Chris Hunt, thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Well, some Democrats want to focus on impeachment. An incoming Republican says taking on big tech ought to be a priority for all of us. Josh Hawley is a senator-elect. He'll be replacing Claire McCaskill in the Senate representing Missouri. One of the first issues he confronts will be the president's renegotiation of NAFTA. Now, a minor change to the wording of that treaty could protect tech companies that decide to censor any content they dislike, something that they are obviously very anxious to do. Senator-elect Hawley joins us tonight. Senator-elect, thank you very much for coming on tonight. Congratulations, by the way, on winning that seat. So I think most of our viewers are probably not aware of this. Most of them probably support renegotiating NAFTA. But this clause, tell us the potential implications of it.
Well, there are changes in the NAFTA agreement to what's called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And what that is, Tucker, it's actually a deal that the tech companies get from the government that says that they can't be sued like any other publisher. They can't be sued like a newspaper. They can't be sued like a TV station. And supposedly what they're supposed to do in return from that immunity is they're not supposed to exercise editorial content or editorial control. They're not supposed to say, well, you can't express this political view or not. My worry is that these companies are increasingly censoring. I mean, they are censoring conservatives. They are censoring based on political viewpoint. And my question is, should they really be getting this special immunity from the government if they're also going to act like censors? And I think we need to take a hard look at that.
Well, it's not clear why they have it. I mean, if I libel somebody, I can be sued. Fox News can be sued. You're a senator-elect. If you libel someone on this show, you can be sued. But Apple cannot be sued, Facebook, Google, the rest. Why should the U.S. government favor those companies in a way that they don't favor my company, for example?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And look, I mean, let's be honest. These tech companies, Facebook, Google, Twitter, they have gotten huge. They have gotten powerful. They have gotten rich on the backs of this special immunity that they get from the federal government, on the back of what's called Section 230. And I think it's time we ask some hard questions. Yes. They're monopolies now. They're very powerful. They appear to be using their power to try and shut down political viewpoints that they don't agree with, usually conservative. And I think we need to ask, do they really deserve these special deals and special carve-outs that have allowed them to get so big and so rich?
Now, you're not even in the United States Senate yet, and you're saying things that are truer and clearer and more forceful than any of the 100 members sitting there now. I don't want to wreck any friendships you might form once you get there, but can you speculate as to why all of this has been happening for the last decade and basically no one in the entire Senate has ever said anything about it?
Well, I just don't know how much attention this has gotten from folks. I think people don't realize, for instance, that these tech companies have gotten such sweetheart deals from the federal government. I don't think they realize that they get treated unlike anybody else, you know, that they're different from TV stations, they're different from publishers, and they're getting this special deal. And again, I think it's time to ask, do they really deserve to get this special deal if they're going to act like censors? We need to ask those hard questions.
How many phone calls do you think you're going to get from lobbyists after you get off the air tonight?
You know, it has never been my ambition to make friends with people who Congress ought to be investigating, frankly, and who they ought to be holding accountable. And look, we have a responsibility to the public to hold the big and the powerful accountable, especially if they misuse their monopoly power. My worry is these companies are doing that. So Congress ought to look into it. Congress ought to investigate this, and they ought to consider action.
Senator-elect Josh Hawley of Missouri. Great to see you tonight. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, this probably won't surprise you if you've thought about it for more than 10 seconds. The Me Too movement is having unexpected consequences for women, particularly on Wall Street. That's next. We've got a Fox News alert for you. The Mueller investigation has just filed brand new documents about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and his cooperation with the investigation, a sentencing guideline, apparently. Catherine Herridge has those documents, is reading them right now and assessing them, and we're going to go to her as soon as she has determined what they say. That'll just take about a minute. We'll be back. In the meantime, CNN President Jeff Zucker has already spent years remaking his channel from a basically centrist sort of liberal news outlet to a platform for pushing pretty extreme political views and prosecuting his personal vendettas, mostly with the help of his marionette. Now, Zucker thinks it's time to aim even higher than that. In a recent appearance on David Axelrod's podcast, which people apparently listen to, Zucker says he's interested in running for office. How does Senator Zucker sound? President Zucker. Dictator for life Zucker. Whatever it is he decides to run for. His ambitions explain CNN's coverage decisions in the past couple of years. Now, if only they would update their name a little bit to ZCN, the Zucker Campaign Network. But it really does tell you a lot. Well, outgoing Senator Claire McCaskill now admits that her party's last-minute attempt to destroy Brett Kavanaugh's reputation and tar him as a rapist backfired. McCaskill says that attempt may be the reason she lost re-election in November. Tammy Bruce is a radio host and president of Independent Women's Voice. She joins us tonight. Tammy, thanks a lot for coming on. Interesting, we just spoke, actually, in the segment before to Josh Hawley, who beat her in that campaign in Missouri. I find it fascinating that she would say that out loud. Seems sort of honest for a politician to say something like that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, she's free now, though, because she's not going back.
Right.
And that allows you some reflection about what's going on. But at the same time, this did not happen in a vacuum, right? This was not a one-off experience. And she should know, because in her political work, she's helped facilitate to a large degree this notion that due process should end, and that due process is not a good idea, particularly on college campuses, which is where, you know, a lot of people have watched this unfold, that if you are accused as a young man on a campus, you are suspended. Questioning the accuser makes you a sexist or a misogynist, and then you lose perhaps your tuition, your scholarships, etc. So we've seen this move through society in little pockets that maybe not everyone noticed, but we saw it happening on campus. It was inevitable, Tucker, that this would happen in the halls of the Senate where they make law, and I think she's realizing, maybe too late, obviously, that what she'd helped facilitate before has now come back in a very serious dynamic and has harmed her and her party.
Yeah, and of course, a female senator loses her seat in the name of female empowerment. Kind of interesting. So where does, I mean, do you see this, taking 3 steps back, do you see this fervor, the intensity of this moment, accelerating in the next couple of years, or calming down and the rest of us regaining our senses a little bit, like Claire McCaskill?
Yeah, this is not unusual for the Democrats. We can expect the Democrats to once again not know when to stop. They will want it to accelerate. They will make the mistake of trying to do that. And especially since they took the House, they're going to think that all of this activity actually helped them. It didn't. And I think and this is going to be up to the Republicans and to fair-minded Americans to remind their loved ones and their families that this is not what we do, that due process matters, that ideas matter. This is the Republicans are going to have to deliver. The president is going to have to really step up to make sure that, you know, this conversation is a fair one and is led appropriately, because we know bad things do happen to women. We want them to get justice, obviously. Right. I've spent most of my adult life working on that. But men are partners in this. That due process and fairness is imperative for all of us. Women will be the first to lose, as I've argued through this entire dynamic.
Well, that's actually...
And that men are already losing very badly.
Well, so you said that from day one. Literally, when the Harvey Weinstein story broke, and we were all horrified, you were horrified, I was horrified, you said in that segment, I'll never forget it, this could whip around and hurt women as well as innocent men. Well, we're getting yet another story suggesting that may be true. The Me Too movement hurting women's employment prospects in many sectors. But in this story, it's on Wall Street, according to Bloomberg, because men are afraid to hire them.
That's right.
Does this story, it's a sad story, does it surprise you?
It doesn't, and yet it's a reflection of the fact that this was always about dividing men from women, that in fact men are our allies on this issue, that the majority of men don't do what Harvey Weinstein was doing, that you know, and this is where we've lost that dynamic, and so all men are afraid. Whereas, in fact, they should be the individuals who help us the most with their brothers and with the men that they work with in their fraternities. There are defenders as well. So this was never really about women for the left. It was about dividing men from women. And yet, for those of us who care about the issue, we really have to make sure that men are brought along with us and that women do get the justice they deserve, but they'll only get it when men are not demonized, all men are not demonized as the bad guy.
You've been a consistent voice on that literally from day one. We appreciate it. Tammy,
thank you, Tucker.
Thanks a lot. We're going to back that Fox News alert we told you about. The Mueller investigation has just filed new documents about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and his cooperation with the investigation. Catherine Herridge has seen those documents and joins us to describe what they contain. Catherine.
Thanks, Tucker. I'm just still going through the documents right now, but among the headlines that the special counsel says former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn provided substantial cooperation with special counsel investigators. They are recommending the low end of the spectrum, no jail time, possibly probation in this case. The key document here I have is what's called the addendum. If you can just come back to me 1 second, because it has some very important details. It outlines here that Mike Flynn participated in 19 interviews, but specifically sections of the addendum are redacted because of ongoing criminal investigations. And I just want to show you sort of the depth and breadth of the redactions in this document. Here on page 2, it says, redacted criminal investigation. The defendant has provided substantial assistance in a criminal investigation, and then you can see the rest of that is redacted. I'm still pouring through the records, but what you can see here, as I said, is the bottom line of the special counsel, that the former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn has provided substantial cooperation. He's sat for almost 24 interviews with the special counsel, and he's also provided communications and other records for ongoing criminal matters which have been redacted in the publicly released documents this evening, citing a need to protect the ongoing investigation, Tucker. So we have a recommendation on sentencing for Mike Flynn, but also very strong evidence that the criminal investigation by the special counsel is ongoing at this time.
So just to be clear, the sentencing that you're referring to would be for the crime to which he pled guilty, which was lying in the course of the investigation to it. So it was a perjury charge, and he might have faced actual prison time.
He could have. The max for lying to federal investigators, which is a violation of USC 1001, is up to 5 years. In this particular case, given he has no prior offenses, the high degree of cooperation, it was always expected that it would be somewhere between 0 and 6 months. What the special counsel is recommending is no jail time here based on his level of cooperation. You're right to highlight that, but the other big headline based on the documents is that this addendum that outlines how Mike Flynn has cooperated is heavily redacted, as I showed you here, and they've done that because they want to keep that information secret. They don't want it to be public because it would tip their hand, if you will, to the ongoing criminal matters that involve other individuals. Tucker.
So, and there's no suggestion, I know you just got these documents, but it's not immediately obvious to you what he's been cooperating about or who might be involved in any of this? I'm sorry to put you on the spot live.
No, you're not putting me on the spot at all, and I want to give you the best answer I can without speculating, because it's just too important. What it speaks to is that he's been providing cooperation, documents, and testimony about allegations of collusion with the Russians and members of the Trump campaign. I'm still going through the documents right now. I don't see anything more specific than that at this time, and that would dovetail with the records saying they want to protect elements of the investigation they believe are still sensitive and could tip their hand, if you will, to individuals who have not faced any criminal prosecution at this time, Tucker.
Boy, there had better be a huge crime underlying all of this.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's redacted, I can tell you that.
We're really going through a lot.
Yeah.
And so if this winds up just being a bunch of stupid perjury charges, I mean, someone should be punished for it. Anyway, Catherine, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we're going to go back to, if you stumble upon anything we need to know about, we're going to go back to you, of course, before we get off the air at 9. Catherine Herridge, thanks very much. Well, vegans aren't just coming after your hamburgers, though they are. They want you to change the way you speak. They're going after your language. Bringing home the bacon, that's out. But so are a lot of other phrases you may enjoy. An actual vegan joins us next to tell us what you can't say. Stay tuned. We've got a Fox News alert for you. The Mueller investigation has just filed brand new documents about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and his cooperation with the investigation, a sentencing guideline, apparently. Catherine Herridge has those documents, is reading them right now and assessing them. And we're going to go to her as soon as she has determined what they say. That'll just take about a minute. We'll be back. In the meantime, CNN President Jeff Zucker has already spent years remaking his channel from a basically centrist sort of liberal news outlet to a platform for pushing pretty extreme political views and prosecuting his personal vendettas, mostly with the help of his marionette. Now, Zucker thinks it's time to aim even higher than that. In a recent appearance on David Axelrod's podcast, which people apparently listen to, Zucker says he's interested in running for office. How does Senator Zucker sound? President Zucker. Dictator for life, Zucker. whatever it is he decides to run for. His ambitions explain CNN's coverage decisions in the past couple of years. Now, if only they would update their name a little bit to ZCN, the Sucker Campaign Network. But it really does tell you a lot. Well, outgoing Senator Claire McCaskill now admits that her party's last-minute attempt to destroy Brett Kavanaugh's reputation and tar him as a rapist backfired. McCaskill says that attempt may be the reason she lost re-election in November. Tammy Bruce is a radio host and president of Independent Women's Voice. She joins us tonight. Tammy, thanks a lot
My
for
pleasure.
coming on. Interesting, we just spoke actually in the segment before to Josh Hawley, who beat her in that campaign in Missouri. I find it fascinating that she would say that out loud. Seems sort of honest for a politician to say something like that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, she's free now, though, because she's not going back.
Right.
And that allows you some reflection about what's going on. But at the same time, this did not happen in a vacuum, right? This was not a one-off experience. And she should know, because in her political work, she's helped facilitate to a large degree this notion that